In today's video, it's going to be all about colors, differentiation, and interest, and how you can achieve these things in your pictures. For that, I'm going to take this raw file right here, and I'm going to turn it into a photo like this at the end, while showing you every single step, every slider, and every adjustment from start to finish. Alright, so before I can really start to play with the light and the colors, I want to make sure that I have some of my basics right. And I'm gonna bring up the shadows here just to get a little bit more details in them, also bringing down the highlights to make them not quite as bright. And I might bring down the clarity, because minus clarity can work especially well in winter pictures because it just makes it seem a little bit more dreamy, but also it makes the whole lighting scheme softer. So from 0 clarity to I think minus 35 here, you can see that it's just a little bit more dreamy and soft. Then I'm gonna go, of course, also into the contrast. I don't think I'm gonna bring that to the right, just makes it way too contrasty, too dramatic. I'd rather have it more natural looking in terms of that. With the color temperature though, I definitely want to make this a lot more bluish. Love that look in winter pictures, but of course don't go too far, don't make it look too crazy either. I'm also gonna change the tint here to make it seem a little bit less crazily purple. And with all of that said, we already have a nice starting point. In fact, you just want to use the basics to get, well, a basic look that you want to go for. So nothing too crazy, nothing too specific, just a nice starting point that you want to edit further with. And speaking of editing further, in terms of the tonal curve, really don't think I really need that here. So let's see, HSL tool, I could fine tune all of the colors here, but there's not really a need for that in my opinion, so I'm just gonna go on to the split toning, and split toning I absolutely love. Now the thing with split toning is that you can really adjust the highlight and shadow portion specifically with your color. So what I'm gonna do here is just click on this little box right next to the highlights, and because I want to make these highlights a little bit more warm, a little bit more inviting, I think I'm gonna go for an orangey yellowish color here, and at the end you always want to make sure that the saturation actually is to your liking. Here I really think I can go quite far, but maybe not quite 100. Around 80 should work quite well. So if I show you from before to after just that highlight part, you can definitely see a huge difference in the bright parts because that's what it's made for. But now I actually want to also go to the shadows, do the exact same thing, but instead with the warm tones, which would really make the picture look terrible, I am going into the blues. And there are actually two reasons why I'm doing that. The first one is because it just works. The shadow areas work really well with cool colors, just as the highlight areas work really well with warm colors. But the other reason is actually to add differentiation from the warm tones to the blue tones. And the thing is, it's actually not only about making it look better, it's also about adding more complexity and more differentiation. So for example, from before any split toning, it really looks very even, very uninteresting, whereas afterwards we already have a ton of differentiation from the warm highlights to the blue shadows here. So once again, from before to after any split toning. Then going into the detail, I did shoot this at ISO 1600 handheld, so there's quite a lot of noise, but I don't think it's too crazy. So what I'm gonna do here is just go into the color, bring that all the way to the right to get rid of all of the green and purple sensor noise there is. And also I think I will have to add a little bit of noise reduction. Always do this process while being zoomed in so I actually see what you do. Now usually I don't like noise reduction too much because it gets rid of a lot of the sharpness and detail, but I do think I'm gonna have to add a little bit here. And I might even add a little bit of sharpening here, just about 60, nothing crazy, but if you add sharpening, you always want to zoom out and make sure that you hold down your Alt or ZMD key and bring the masking slider to the right to only select the areas that you actually want to be sharpened. Being done with the detail tool, let's go on in chronological order here, just lens corrections, removing chromatic aberration, so any of the purple and green fringing on the high contrast edges are removed if there are any. Also, you want to make sure that you enable your profile corrections. In this case, I shot this with a Canon 18-55 kit lens, and that will get rid of all of your distortion. Then going down again, transform. Now there are some houses and it's not really super straight, but I really don't care, to be honest. So let's go down to the effects. Now here, what I really love to do is add vignetting. And vignetting is pretty much just making your corners darker. Now you of course don't want to go into -100, but I'm just gonna leave it there for a second to showcase you the midpoint here. I would really suggest you to play around this slider so you can choose how much vignetting you want to have in your picture. And also the feathers, so you can choose how soft your gradient from the vignetting to the rest of the picture is here. So then after all of that, I of course don't want to go -100, just kind of crazy. But I do think this picture could use a little bit of vignetting, actually more than a little bit, about let's say about -35. Now the thing with vignetting is that it can work, but it can also not work, so really play around with it for yourself. But here, from before any to after, it really works, gives a lot more attention towards the center of the picture, and just kind of makes the overall mood a little bit more nightish and dark. Going to the last global adjustment, the camera calibration. This is really detailed adjustment, so this is different from picture to picture. You can play around with the different camera profiles and just see if you like a certain look better. This will change your overall look of the picture, your overall colors and brightness and so on. Just go through them and see what you like best. Camera standard actually looks pretty good. From comparing Adobe standard to camera standard, just a little bit more warm and more bright, so I think I'm gonna stick there. And again, this is really up to you and very different from picture to picture. But being done with the global adjustments here, let's take another peek at from before to after. Now the entire color and lighting is already much more interesting, much more balanced, and much closer to what I want it to be. But the true uniqueness and the true customization, especially with pictures where you have a ton of opportunity to enhance the light, is definitely within the local adjustments. So first thing I'm actually gonna do here is play with the graduated filters, and graduated filters are great for very large adjustments to your picture. So for example, I think I'm gonna add one just for the bottom here, and go a bit into the minus exposure because I kind of want to close out the picture. If you see from before any minus exposure, it's just kind of a little bit too bright in the foreground. It's, you know, it doesn't contain your eye within the picture. So just gonna make that a little bit darker. Also, I'm gonna grab another one for the right side here, and since this right side is a little bit brighter with the car and this store window than the left side, I think I'm just gonna enhance that and actually increase the exposure as well as bring up the whites a little bit. And you know, this is not something crazy, as you can see from before that one filter to after. It's a very subtle adjustment, but it does help. And with that, actually, kind of as a counterpart, I'm adding another filter over the other half of the picture and just go a little bit into the minus exposure. Now the goal of all of that is just to complexify and make your whole lighting a little bit more interesting. So you don't want to go into -1 stop or 1.5 stops because it's just too much. Now of course you can do it if you really want to, but I think about -1/3 of a stop just works fine. So then going and grabbing another one, let's just take a look at the entire picture once again and look at the color. Now I do think because this bottom right part is already very bright and has a lot of light, I think some additional color here could even work. So maybe a little bit of warmth, nothing too crazy though, just a little hint. Then let's take another quick second to just look at the picture. Don't worry about any adjustments for now, but just see the entire exposure, the entire colors, just look at it and really understand it. So yeah, I think I'm gonna add another graduated filter here, and this time I'm gonna add one over the top of the picture, just kind of like that. As you might have noticed, I really like very soft gradients, so any of the adjustments I do are very natural and blend into the rest of the picture. But I'm not gonna change any exposure here, I don't think. Instead, I'm gonna go into the color again and go a little bit into the blues. Now, you might think, well, blue, you already have blue, but the thing is, you cannot only just add differentiation from oranges to blues to reds. you can also add differentiation within the blues, within the oranges, within the reds. You can create different hues and different luminosities of these colors. Now for that, in this case, I'm just gonna go into the blue color here and make it a bit more dark actually, because I really want a dark blue in the top here, and that is so I can grab another new graduated filter here, drag it over the bottom left, and go into the color, but this time choose a very light blue. So with all of that, you want to make sure that it still looks natural, you want to not overdo it, you know, like this it would just be, but if you do it in a reasonable way, it can greatly add to your picture. And I think that's pretty much all I want to do in terms of the graduated filters, at least for now, so let's just take a quick look at before any of them and afterwards. Now look at the bottom right being very orange, very warm, the bottom left being very light bluish, and the sky being very dark bluish. The graduated filter is a really great way to start out with your customization of the lighting and color. So going on, I'm actually going to grab the adjustment brush real quick. And I do think I'm gonna add some more vignetting in just the corner. You want to make sure that you have your feather and flow at 100 if you adjust anything like that. And I'm just gonna add a little bit more vignetting here and also some more custom vignetting on the bottom, even though I might have gone a little bit too far. So just press down the Alt key and you will get a minus adjustment brush, and then you can remove previously added adjustments. So that's pretty much it. Now the adjustment brush isn't something that I use personally very much, but the Radial filters are something that I use all of the time, and I can promise you we're gonna spend some time here. Now essentially the Radial filter is really just a round filter, but what makes it special, and by the way you want to make sure that you invert the mask because otherwise it will just adjust anything outside of the filter, and you also want to make sure you have the feather at 100, because what makes it so special is that you can adjust all of these settings and you can do whatever you want. So let's just go like crazy. So you actually see I do something here and you can just right click and duplicate the filter, drag it to another spot, and then adjust the sliders again, and all of the things you've adjusted previously, but it will just affect that very filter. And if you duplicate it again, you still have all of these settings in the new filter, but by adjusting it further, you will only adjust that very filter. So this is one of the many benefits of the Radial filter. It's very fast, very easy, and additionally to that, it is very natural looking, because you can have a much softer feather than you would have with the adjustment brush. And let me just show you. So with the feather at 0, you can see it's literally just the effect, and you don't want to use it, that's pretty much the point. But as I bring the feather to the right, it starts to make the edge more soft, more blend in with the rest of the picture, and it looks better and better and better and better. And at 100, it's so soft. Look at this. This is the entire filter, and the adjustment is really just in the middle third. And all of the rest is just clearance area to blend in with the rest of the picture. So Radial filter, it's very easy to use, and it's also very natural looking with light. So let me just reset all of these settings here, and before I actually add a Radial filter and start dodging and burning, which is making individual parts either darker and brighter and adjusting all of the colors and so on, I'm actually just gonna take another look at the picture. And you might find it silly, but it really helps to look at your picture, see where you could add exposure, where could you decrease exposure, what kind of color do you want to go for. It's always very important to not just edit and edit and edit, but also take a pause and actually think what you want to go for, what is the look that you want to achieve. Because otherwise you will just end up doing stuff and maybe get more of a random picture than really what you wanted to go for initially. Alright, so I think I got a pretty good idea, and there are gonna be multiple steps and multiple layers of the Radial filters. But the first one is just gonna be a little bit of plus exposure, definitely some plus whites, and also some minus highlights, and I might even mix that with a little bit of warm color. So let's just add a filter here, see how it looks, and adjust all of the values accordingly. and I think that actually looks pretty close to what I wanted it to look like. So the reason why I start off with this relatively, not super severe adjustment is so I can go over the windows and add a filter here and just fine tune everything. Fine tuning is the keyword to all of this because you want to make sure it looks natural and not just interesting, not just crazy, but do all of that in a good way. So a very large filter, but you've seen how small the actual effect is, so I might make it even bigger. And I think that looks pretty good, to be honest. I might add a little bit of contrast here, but nothing too crazy. Then I'm gonna right click duplicate, bring it over the windows here on the left, just make it even bigger for the bigger two windows here. Then right click duplicate and make it a little bit smaller for the rest of the lights. So the car headlights, definitely gonna add one over here. Then right click duplicate, also this window thing, light, whatever. I'm also gonna enhance this a bit. Then right click duplicate. Some of these filters might overlap with one another, but it's really not a big deal, don't worry about it, just go over all of the light sources with, once again, a relatively low adjusted filter, because you don't want to just, have crazy plus exposure and crazy color, and just do that with every single window and every single light, because then you will just make it look too much, too unnatural. This is just the first step of the entire adjustment, so you want to keep it relatively neutral and relatively natural. So then right click duplicate, maybe also another one, just a very small one over these lights in the very far away background. Alright, so I think I've covered everything here. Let's just take a quick look, because if you just look at the picture right now, you might not even realize that there is a difference, because doesn't it look like before? Well, let me show you from before any rail filters to after. It's really a huge difference. Now, it's not a super severe difference. Look at that. It just adds so much more warmth, so much more complexity, and it's such a nice starting point. I can't stress it enough. You don't have to adjust something like crazy for it to have a huge impact. So going further though, I'm gonna grab a new rail filter, and first of all, just once again with these presets here, drag it over this part of the house, because the idea here is just to make the entire house a little bit more interesting, because it's kind of flat, kind of boring, so I definitely don't want to add very much color at all, maybe just a hint, or perhaps even go into the purples. You can really play around with it. There are so many different opportunities, different options that you can go for. It's all about trying out stuff and seeing what works, what doesn't work. But anyways, gonna go into the plus whites here, minus highlights, just gonna reset that because I just did that so the lights in the windows wouldn't blow out, but I'm not gonna need that for the house. Then not quite as much plus exposure, but in exchange a little bit of contrast. So let's zoom out again and add a very big filter over this wall of the building. Then I'm gonna right click duplicate and actually make it smaller, and just kind of put it in the middle. Then right click duplicate again, add another one over here, just fine tuning it. Perhaps a little bit more exposure and a little bit more warmth. You can also do that with the color temperature and fine tuning it again. So you might say this still looks the same as before, but once again, let's take a look at before any rail filters to after. Just look at this part of the house right here. It looks very much more interesting while not being overdone. So yeah, I think you kind of get the point. I won't repeat myself too many times anymore. But a really good technique for this dodge and burning, for making stuff brighter, is really to see where is it a little bit boring, where is it a little bit dull, where could you enhance that without making it look unnatural and then just adding a filter there. And also it can really work to, for example, add a very big filter, then right clicking and duplicating it and making it actually smaller, and just go over another area that you want to be even brighter and kind of stack parts of it on top of each other by doing that. So always start with the bigger filter first. This is a very time-consuming task, well, very time-consuming, maybe about 5 to 10 minutes if you really want to do it right, but it's absolutely worth it. So I'm just gonna add another one over here, right-click duplicating. This house facade could look a little bit more interesting as well. Adjusting the size, right-click duplicate, perhaps make this even a bit more bluish than before. So yeah, in terms of the facade, I think it looks pretty good. So keep in mind, what we've done so far is add plus exposure and some color over the windows, so there's a little bit more of a spill on the entire side, and just so the light looks a little bit more severe. And we've also added some Radial filters with various effects, various plus exposure, a little bit of color on these houses here to add some more complexification. But what I want to do next is actually just enhance the lighting even further. So I'm gonna go into the plus exposure a little bit more, leave the highlights at 0, plus whites here, and definitely a little bit of warm color. And I'm just gonna add relatively small Radial filters here and make it look as if these shops would have spilled in certain directions way more than they actually have. So right click duplicate just here, maybe add another one over there, and I should probably zoom in for this. So yeah, just right click duplicate, maybe here a bit more, then let's see what we can do towards the left. Once again, right-clicking and duplicating, just make it seem as if this light right here would have been much brighter than it actually is. Right-click, duplicate. We can definitely do a lot with the car, but let's actually do that at last, because I want to add a little bit more color here. And the thing is, you don't only have to add warmth. Once again, you can go into the colors with these Radial filters and maybe add a little bit of purple. As long as you keep it looking natural at the end, it is a great value, a great differentiation, and a great additional interest. So right click duplicating, maybe just a bit more here. And even, you know, on the ceiling thing, make this a little bit more interesting. Then as we move further back, we have to decrease the size in the filters, of course. Just making this one a little bit smaller. Right click duplicate, maybe the lanterns, just so they seem as if they would have spilled way more than I actually did. Then let's see here in the background, maybe just another one over this part right here, just the right part of this hotel. Once again, there are so many options you can have, so many things you can do. But yeah, you really have to play around with it yourself, choose different settings, choose different colors, and just see what it does. See if it works, see if it doesn't. But I'm gonna add another one over the car here. And for that, I'm actually going to add a very big one, angle it like this, and make sure that the entire area around the car is very bright. The main thing I want to do here is to add whites, and also perhaps even a little bit of a purplish color, adjust the saturation on that. Then let's grab another one, and maybe add a little bit more warmth in this one, plus whites, not really any exposure difference, and make a little bit of a smaller filter and add it in the bottom right here. And let's just quickly see, is there anything I want to do to this picture before I say that I'm done? I do think there is actually a very small thing, which is adding another 2 Radial filters over the car's headlights with some minus exposure. So yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Let's zoom out again. And you know, there are so many different opportunities once again, but I'm just gonna say that I'm done here. So this is from before any Radial filters, and you can see it's a huge difference. This is afterwards. You could add further colors, you could add filters with just minus exposure and make certain parts a bit darker. Perhaps that's what's needed in some of these areas here. You know, there's so much you can do, so much time you can spend, but I really don't want to make this video an hour long for you guys at the end. But I do think I'm gonna remove this star in the sky here. It's on a crane, but you can't really see the crane, so it's kind of pointless to have that just flowing in the sky. Another thing that I might do really quick before I say that I'm done with the entire picture is actually just add just like 2 or 3 minus exposure Radial filters. And, you know, I do think there is some differentiation needed because that creates contrast and interest. If you have everything very bright, it's also kind of boring. Let's also add another one over here. It's very fast with right click and duplicating. But with that, I do think I'm done with the dodge and burning with the Radial filters, but also with the entire picture. So let's take a look at the history here, a very long one in this case, and see how the raw file looks. Now, I'm not gonna say this looks terrible or anything, but it's not as interesting. It's very dull in comparison. And in terms of the picture at the end, now, the soft lighting works so much better with this winter scene, so much more dreamy and mysterious. I really love it. But yeah, I mean, you can see the differences for yourself, and keep in mind that you don't have to go as far as I've gone with this edit if you think it's overdone. I would really just suggest you to take whatever you found helpful from this video and just disregard the rest, because everybody has their own style, everybody has their own preferences, and it doesn't mean that I'm some crazy great guy at Lightroom. I'm just giving you kind of my perspective on how I did what I did. Anyways, thank you very much for watching and have a great day.